The movie starts with a man named Siccin pacing around his wife Saadet, where a jinn was shown behind him. Sometimes later, Hilal, a small girl, writes a letter in which she explains their reason for moving into their grandma's house was because of her dad. Halal's business is to go bankrupt. Her grandma Saadet is sick. She then explains about her brother Omer, who started to stammer after a shocking incident in which small kids killed an innocent kitten. Since the day they moved into the house, her brother has a fear seeing their grandpa's tomb in the house, and she has the fear too. Later that day, Faiza and her kids Hilal and Omer were having lunch. The servant lady Rahim serves them the lunch, and after she left, Omer becomes unstable and starts to make sound using the plate and fork. When they try to stop him, he leaves the table. Later that night, Hilal and Omer used to have a method to communicate between them by covering his face using a cloth to reduce the stammering. After they had their chit-chat, they go to bed. Omer has a dream in which he enters his grandma's room where Rahimi and his grandma scare him. His sister then consoles him. On the other hand, Halil has a dream in which his friend gives him some money for his debt, and later he hears a voice from outside where he sees his son falling into a tomb. He rushes to pull him out when a jinn appears and bites him. He wakes up to see it all an illusion and goes to the restroom to wash his hands, and there he sees his mom in a bathtub, and she tells him that she gave all the money to a woman. He then wakes up from the dream. In the next day morning, Omer opens the power socket and pulls some kind of paper from the socket and falls unconscious. Hilal calls her mom and dad to help him. Faiza was seen in the bathtub where she dreams as Omer pouring a mixture of teeth set which Reheim grinded. Later that day, Orhan was working in the factory, where he hears some whispering and goes outside to see Omer and prays for him. In the house, Faiza sees Saadet throwing up and calls Rahim and looks around. She looks in the basement room where Rahima stays and stumbles on a nail, from which hair comes out and scares her. Faiza later tells Halil about Kid's desire to leave the house and tells him about the boiler room which is locked in the downstairs. Halil, hearing this, tries to open the boiler room in downstairs, but the door wasn't able to open with all the keys he had. He later tells his wife that he will break the door in the next day as he couldn't open the door with keys. Later that night, Hilal hears a sound from her wardrobe, where she finds Omer. When she pulls the cloth which they usually use to communicate, suddenly Omer changes into a jinn and scares her. Orhan on the next day visits a Hoja and asks about the connectivity he has with Omer, where Hoja tells him to help the kid. Halil, on the other hand, breaks into the boiler room, and there he sees sculptures similar to humans. The lights inside room doesn't work, so he uses his mobile phone. He finds a box which has money and gold in it. While he was seeing it, a jinn appears behind and scares and warns him not to sell the house. Faiza's sister Kubra contacts her sister, where she tells her to burn all the paper with spell inside the house, as she had contacted Hoja and shown him a pie of paper that Omer took from the power socket before. Faiza does as her sister told, and an egg rolls from the table to the floor and breaks. She then sees a slash of hair coming out from the floor mat. There she sees a spell binded in a paper with hair and takes it in her hand, where the jinn grabs her hand and scares her. Relieved, she turns around where jinn again scares her. Halil calms her after he heard her scream. Later, Orhan talks to Omer in the sleep, and both pray. Halil wasn't able to sleep, so he goes to his mom's room and tells Rahim that he will take care for the night. He suddenly loses conscience himself and starts to choke his mom, who changes to a jinn and scares him. He wakes up from the couch in his mom's room and comes out to Reheim and tell her to look after his mom and leaves from there. In Hilal's room, she hears her mom calling and goes down to check the dining table and gets shocked to see her whole family, including her grandpa. Suddenly, her brother scares her and she wakes up to see it's a dream. In the morning, Halil plans to sell his car and goes to look for a dealer. Outside the house, he sees Rahim and follows her to her house. There she reveals to Halil that she used to tell fortune for her mom, where one day she asked her to write a spell and save him as he was sick and can't be saved. Some days later, Saadet met with Rahim again and told her that Musin married a jinn and had a child and asked for her help. They then performed an exorcism to send the jinn back to her world, but Musin died in the process, and the jinn started to torture Saadet because it thinks that she was the cause of her husband's death. She then shows Halil scars in her hands caused by jinn, which Halil also has. She then reveals the biggest shock, that she has not been in the house after the incident, as the jinn used her to put some spell-written papers in the walls in the house, and from then on, it never let her inside the house. Halil then asks about her identical person, who looked after his mom, where she tells that the person was a jinn and they torture his mom till dead as a revenge. They were the one who made them to bury his dad in the house. Angry Halil confronts his mom, whereas the jinn kills Rahim as revealed the truth. Halil then tells his wife that they will leave the house the next day due to the situations. Later that night, the jinn warns Saadet that she would never be able to leave the house. Halil then enters his mom's tomb and acts different and tells his mom they are leaving and wakes up Omer. This causes Orhan to understand the danger as he can connect with Omer and run to Saadet's house to save them. Halil later wakes his wife and daughter and ties them in a chair in the boiler room. The jinn then appears in the room as he is under its influence, and he breaks a gas pipeline to make an explosion and kill everyone inside the house. Orhan breaks into the house and sees Saadet and understands that she possessed and summons the jinn to use her body to communicate. He later uses a spell and sits opposite to Saadet and summons again. The jinn refuses to leave the family, so he starts to perform exorcism, and there the jinn tells Orhan the truth, and later he uses a sacred emblem and burns the jinn and saves the family. The movie ends with Hilal writing in her diary that her grandma died after 2 months and they sold the house to get out of the debt. Her dad's business also seems to got better, and Omer got his speech back. Orhan and Omer still has the connection as he sees the happy family and feels relieved and happy. To see more videos, hit the like, share, and subscribe button.